Welcome to this Q&A with Steve McQueen, director of 3 films in this year's New York Film Festival, including our opening film, Lovers Rock, which I think many of you have just seen. This is one of part of an anthology called Small Acts. We touched on this a little bit in the introduction. Having seen 3 of the films, all of which we're showing in the festival this year, I'm really struck by how different they are from one another, and I think that really speaks to the scope and the ambition of the project. Can you say a little bit about just conceptualizing the whole and also, the parts? Like what were certain things that you wanted to represent? I mean, these are films that span nearly 20 years, and it's a period that sort of maps over, your formative years, right, as a child. So some of them are based on well-known incidents, or relatively well-known incidents, maybe at least to people in Britain, and some are not less so, like Lovers Rock, which is very much a film about everyday experience.
Well, I mean, I'll just start with Lovers Rock, which you've just seen. Lovers Rock was for me about every single sense: the taste, the smell, the sound, the feel. It was about a certain kind of aesthetic. A certain kind of black aesthetic, if you will, a joy, a release. It was a certain kind of I don't know, love. It was a sort of explosion of joy and all the elements, all the sort of elements that come into that. And as a child, I remember going to bed with the bass line pumping in my head. If I went to a blues party, my mother or my father would put me in a different room because I couldn't, obviously I was a child then, but I always remember, because you always were at a certain height as a child, and you always saw things maybe that the adults didn't really sort of pay too much attention to. But when you're a certain height, you smell the food, of course, you smell the clothes, you remember even the touch of things. So that was a very much a central part of that, and black joy in a way. I mean, it was about that. It was about release. So Lovers Rock was very much about that, and that was very important to put into the concept of small acts. And of course, we have Mangrove, which was showing. Mangrove, of course, was a very important court case, which happened in 1970 in Old Bailey. It was a situation where where Frank Critchlow opened this cafe. He opened a cafe for West Indian people and for everyone, basically. But it was a West Indian cafe, a black-owned West Indian cafe. And it became a certain kind of magnet for sort of radicals. And of course, he had to, because of that, other people in the state were sort of not liking that. So anyway, I could talk about individual films or and get into details of that, but the whole concept in some ways was about how people lived, and from the ordinary to the extraordinary. That's what I wanted.
Right. So to just maybe focus on Lovers Rock a bit more. I mean, it's, as you describe it, I mean, the film is such a sensory experience. It's tactile. I mean, you really get the sense that it's a film that comes from lived experience, or maybe from sense memories. Are they just your memories, or was there a research process involved in terms of talking to people, like looking at what houses looked like, what people wore, what they cooked, what they listened to, because all of that comes through so vividly in the film?
Yeah. Well, that was a part of my background, also part of Courtier, the co-writer's background. I mean, I think his brother his mother used to have blues parties at his house. So he remembered a lot of that stuff as a child, again, of a similar height as myself, I imagine. I came through it through like my aunt, because for me, I remember stories of my aunt. And what happened, my aunt wasn't allowed to go to these parties. Of course, my grandmother would sort of, out, but my uncle would leave the back door open for her. So she used to go to blues parties. She lived in a place called Shepherd's Bush, which was next door to Ladbroke Grove. And then she would go to Ladbroke Grove, Mine Hill, to these blues parties and come back in the morning. And then she had to go to church the following day. So it was almost like Cinderella. for her in a way. Yeah, absolutely. 12 o'clock came and pumpkins arrived and mice arrived. It was a reality. So, but it is about that, isn't it? It is about that situation of when you're young and it's all about the clothes and the music. And that party is real. That party is not pretend. That environment is so kind of another world. No, I wouldn't even say that is too much. It becomes a reality within your everyday. And it was magical. So what I wanted to do with Lovers Rock was bring people to that party, bring the audience there. So therefore, there was a fluidity within the music. For me, this is my musical. This is a musical that I've always wanted to do. This is my musical, really. And I
Yeah.
think the Courtier's history and my history, it was a great collaboration.
And yeah, no, I definitely see the film as a musical, and, which brings me to, I guess, my questions about the choice of music. If you can say a little bit about that. The songs are very important in the film, and the choreography. I mean, it's so much a film about, you talk about Black Joy. It's a film about bodies in motion, and the sort of like the liberation, and exhilaration of that.
I mean, obviously, it's a very sexy movie, but it was very good back because the sexuality and the freedom and the equality within the sexuality was very important too. That and the sort of that union and that sort of I mean, that's Lovers Rock. There was a without both parties being 50-50, there's nothing. And I think just also the ritual, the whole idea of how I remember how people used to grab sort of put their arm out to dance with a woman, a guy. He's always touch the elbow and then go down to the hand. That would be the ritual. Touch the elbow and go down to the hand, and hopefully she would be interested, and that would be it. So little details like that, I remember. I mean, a lot of the music was by Courtier because Courtier's mother used to have the parties. There's 3 tracks that I can remember choosing, which were obviously the Blondie track, which I loved, and which was very much in at that time. I mean, Blondie was very big at that time. That's what punk and reggae was kind of closeness. And then there was Kunta Kinte, which was the one where everyone goes crazy. I remember that track. And of course, 3 Games. That was for me, that was the central part of the blue in that party. And again, it was about that sort of liberation, that freedom, that nakedness, that sort of, that's what I want to see. You don't see that very much in cinema, or Black people having that and total absolute nakedness. I think that was only, honestly, I know that for a fact, it was only made possible that was because of my crew. That was a fact. I know for a fact. I mean, a lot of the heads of the department, which I was very adamant about, were Black, and who was on set. That would not happen. Just wouldn't have happened. I don't think people felt free enough to sort of. I'm not saying people. I think there would have been a bit of inhibition, and the fact that I was there to allow them to do whatever they wanted to do, and I was there. Sometimes you could create that magic. I mean, that's what you try to do, at least, as being the director. At least that's what I try to do. At least.
So you worked with, can you say a little bit about some of these collaborators, your cinematographer?
Cinematographer, Shabier, he is absolutely amazing. He's from Antigua, and he's a skater, and of course he's a sailor. He was an island man. So he has a wonderful sense of balance as a DP. I think he's got some of the best hands I've ever seen. So all that, you see he's in there with the people. He's in there, and it doesn't matter how he goes within the audience, or not audience, excuse me.
The characters, yeah.
Into the party, into these characters, into the party. You are there with him. Beautiful. And there's no way, I don't think there's any way that he got those images in the way that we did. Absolutely not.
And the actors worked with a choreographer as well?
Helen Scott, the costume designer, was absolutely fantastic. Jacqueline, the costume designer. Yes, I mean, she's an artist. She's just an artist. We had so much fun. going back and looking at and doing research about the clothes, because there was a particular style. Don't forget, London, we're known for our style. That's the fact. You know, if you go from, you know, rockers, punks, skinheads, goths, you know, the rastas, the ska. You know, it was all about that. It was not, you know, what I love about London. If I buy a nice pair of shoes and I walk down the street in London, I know someone's going to give me a nod. Not everywhere is going to give you a nod. You know, they're going to with nice respect. You know what I mean? So it's all about the detail. And what's so beautiful about it is that a lot of these dresses were made, handmade. I remember my mother had a Singer sewing machine, and everybody would be getting patterns and making their dresses and blouses. So a lot of those dresses you saw were actually made, and a lot of those dresses will appear at these blues parties will be made. You know, everyone wants to be unique. No one wants to have the same dress as everyone else. So it'd be beautiful. And the guys with their double-breasted blazers and, you know, the gold buttons, and it was you know, you had to come sharp to the dance. You had to come sharp to the dance.
So what's happened to this tradition of the blues parties, the house parties?
Well, good question. I think you know, American music came in. I think there was a lot of people, you know, dub took over, and I think a lot of people, you know, wanted to sort of, you know, because my generation, it was all that soul. It was all that soul music. It was all that soul music. So the other kind of blues parties was so, they always play reggae, but it was the soul men that took over. For example, you know, at the beginning, when Franklin asks, you know, he asked a question like, are you a soul head or are you a reggae head? He goes, no, I'm a lovers rock person. But a lot after that turned into American soul music, and of course the English versions of American soul music. A lot of that, you know, like jazz funk, stuff like that, blues parties and stuff like that. And then there was Rare Groove. Rare Groove were these sort of 70s records, mainly from James Brown and his disciples. Those kind of sort of, you know, B-sides and stuff like that, where people used to sort of, you know, go crazy about. There's be people just searching out for these sort of rare vinyls, and that became a situation where people used to go to those clubs. So there was a evolution from these sort of blues parties to that, and of course after that we had Acid House. Acid House came around '89. And then that was that. But all of these things come from blues, comes from dub, come from these kind of parties, you know, from the shebeens my mother and father used to go to in the 60s. There's this sort of progression, you know, there's this, but yeah, there's this sort of narrative. And if you want to go back to sort of, you know, sound systems, you can even talk about, you know, hip hop. Obviously that came from Jamaica, you know, the seeds of that, what happened was, you know, in the Bronx. So I mean, these blues parties, you know, these shebeens came about because, you know, black people were not welcome into clubs. There would be a quota. There would be a situation where if you were allowed in the club, if you were welcome in the club, there'd be a limit of how many people could go in. But more likely, people were not welcome, even if they were. People who would want to go, you know. So what happened was people started to make their own, and they did it in a very sort of, you know, a homemade way, which was, you know, doing these blues at the house and charging people to come in and charging for drinks. So there were clubs in houses. And of course, what I loved about this, you know, when I went, I remember these humongous speakers in someone's living room, you know, so it was just like how these living rooms were, you know, you can imagine what were happening, you know, people watching TV or sort of, you know, hang out with their families, and then all of a sudden they'd be transformed into these nightclubs. Yeah. I mean, I love it because that's what Small X is about. It is about, you know, doing it yourself. Don't be worried if people aren't letting you in, then you just do it your way. You know, just get on with it, basically.
Can we just come back to the point you were making about just how you created these conditions for the actors, you know, that allowed them to lose their inhibitions? So I'm just wondering if you could say a little bit more about what the atmosphere on the set was like for a film like this. Was it as joyous as it seems?
You know what, Dennis? I think once you get people who are the same age, same generation, or acknowledge one another, And they find themselves in an environment where they're being given this platform that they've never sort of been in before, but knowing it's a platform of, how can I say, a platform where they can shine, they go for it. And also, it was a case of the cameras didn't have to. You know what was interesting about this whole thing? The cameras didn't have to be there. That party would have been created by itself without the cameras, and that's wonderful. I was invited. I might have created, but actually I was invited, and thank you for them for that. Absolutely. And as a filmmaker, I mean, flipping heck, that's you're lucky to be present. You know, it's like fishing. You know, you hope you catch something, and you know, that's it.
Mm. So for those scenes, then did you give less direction than you typically would? Did you just there was?
I mean, there was a choreographer, a dance choreographer. They had trained before, absolutely. And forgive me, I just forgot her name. I've just been mixing and editing, my goodness. So please forgive me. And she was training them, and that was incredible. And then, you know, but when they're in the room, you sort of like leave all the things behind. You know, you have it, but at the same time, you're in the room, so you adapt to it. You adapt what you know yourself and what you've learned to the room. So it was one of those things where, you know, yeah, it was less directing. I think I did my best directing. You know why? Because you let things go. I unclutched. You know, it was a case of let's see what happens. And of course, when you got great actors, they are all great actors, by the way. They know they're not, it's not just, yes, they are inhibited, but they're in control. They're not, it's like, you know, it's like we, as a jazz, a musician, you lose it, but you're in control. You're in control. Improvisation, you're in control. It's not just sort of funny duddy. It's in control. There's a method behind the madness. So for me, it was one of those situations where, how can I say? Yeah, I just, all I'll do is repeat what I just said. I was invited. I might have created, but I was invited. And you know, things like silly games, when they start people to go a cappella in silly games, that was not planned. That was not planned. Oh no, that was not planned. That just happened. It came out. I was like, okay, we would keep just record it. All that stuff, all that stuff, all the variations, all the certain kind of variations on the tune, and then towards the end, silly, yeah, all that kind of stuff. That was not planned. That happened. That happened. I'm a witness with a camera. That's all I was. But guess what? They knew the time. They knew 1979, 1980. They were in character for that time. So certain things they couldn't do because of the period, of course. But they sort of channeled that. So yeah, it was amazing. It was just one of those things where it's punk rock. It was. But also, there was certain times where I'd be sort of going in there with my hands and knees, sort of, you know, telling people, you know, the camera's up here, and I was like, so some of the times I was on my hands and knees on the floor, and then calling back to my monitor. So it was just beautiful. You know, sometimes you just it's I can't even describe it, Dennis. It was just as you saw in the film. It was euphoric.
Wow.
That's what euphoric.
It's amazing. It sounds like it's a very different way of working than you typically would on a narrative feature film, but maybe more in line with some of your other work in terms of installation work, because you talk about observing, capturing, documenting something, and you worked in those modes as a visual artist.
Yeah, yes, you're quite right. You're quite right. I think as an artist, I don't know. You know, I don't know if I don't know if there's this or that.
Yeah.
But I think it's you have to know when to do something and then know when to step back. That's all. I think this was that occasion, and especially, you know, step back, because all that stuff was just so. It was euphoric. It was euphoric. I feel I want to just, you know, want to dance right now. Sorry, but it's vibrant. You know, it was just all about life and possibilities. It was all about possibilities and life, possibilities. It was, you know, it was beyond, and that's how it was, and you know, it's great.
Well, I think that's
What I'm doing is repeating myself now. So,
no, I think that's a great note to end on, a great point to make. And you know, this is a strange year in which we don't have, I think, for the first time ever, an opening night party for the New York Film Festival, but we have an opening film that basically is the party. So I think it was a very fitting choice, and we're really sad that you're not here, but thank you so much for the films, and you know, we'll make sure you're here the next time we show your work.
so, yeah, we'll like party like it's 1999. We're gonna die anyway, so let's go. You know, let's go for it. Let's go out with two guns blazing. Why not?
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Dennis.